What is happening, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Loot Drops. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all about Division 2 with Warlords of New York on the way. People have been really excited. I myself have found myself getting back into the game. We're going to talk about the mechanics that are changing. We're going to ask the question, will Warlords of New York bring players back? Why did people bail before, though? James got to play it. We'll talk a little bit about his reactions and the community reactions. All that and more coming up right now. All right, joining me today is Paul Tassi, James Duggan. Guys, how's it going today?
Good. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Hello, chat. Hello, James.
What's up?
Hard day working from home.
Yeah, exhausted.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to be totally honest with both of you. I am very excited about Division 2. We've been talking about doing this episode for a long time.
You've been talking about doing this episode.
Well, no, so is Paul. We brought up Division 2 and Borderlands 3 as an option for the show, right? And I started diving back into the Division and watching all the state of the games, and I actually started really getting back into Division. I kind of surprised myself. So I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into Warlords of New York about why did we stop playing? Like, what was the fall-off point for you, Duggan? Because you played more than I did at launch. You devoured the game. You had to do the review. At what point were you like, I'm good?
I actually stopped before the raid, and I think I did the raid a little bit. I don't really have a distinct memory of playing the raid. I think I was good when I realized the Dark Zone was kind of hamstrung. Really, I guess we've talked about it a couple times in the show, but for a game like that, it's either got to be pumping out this great mechanically bespoke raid content, or there's got to be a great PvP aspect. And I just didn't necessarily feel the desire to continue the loot chase. I didn't feel a whole sense of coherency in terms of late game builds. There wasn't a lot mechanically different about the builds. Like, like one of the things we're fixing with Warlords of New York is the fact that you can finally have kind of a skill power build, which, the fact that this is the second game is something that I think they probably should have gotten right from the onset. But I guess every time I think about my problems with the Division, which it's a fine game, like it's astonishing. I think it's noteworthy for a couple reasons. First of all, the Division 2 I think is noteworthy because it was probably the most complete shared world shooter at launch in the history of shared world shooters. Just in terms of here's what we have. The loot progression, while it kind of tapered off towards the end there, was pretty good the whole way through. They had these world tiers. They had the new faction at the end of the game. So they had a lot there for players to kind of dig into without having to wait 6 months. And then they followed that up with that mission.
The invasion?
Yeah, the invasion, and then finally the raid, and then other things like that. But I think the supplementary content there should have been the Dark Zone. And I had a really good experience with the Dark Zone in the Division 1 beta.
Yeah.
But as soon as people figured out how to play it, and moreover, that they shouldn't really be fighting each other, it immediately became much less interesting. And it was much worse than the Division 2. Just because there wasn't a whole lot of incentive. There wasn't anything specific to my recollection that you could attain through the Dark Zone that gave you some kind of mechanical benefit elsewhere, or at least a side grade that was worth chasing.
I get your points. Paul, you played Division 2 around launch. I know you've written a lot of articles about the game, and I remember reading your pieces about the raid and such. At what point do you feel like players were just, I'm out, like I'm done? And maybe for you personally, why did you stop?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the player, but I mean, I didn't stop where I stopped with the original game, where you would hit the end of the campaign, and there essentially was no end game for the original. But like James said, like it carried on from the start. They built in at least X amount of hours for the end game, like right at launch, and that was good enough to keep me going for a pretty long time after that, because there was all this stuff to do. You had to like reclaim the whole map again from a whole new faction, and like rerun all these redesigned missions, and like that was really cool, and that was engaging for a good amount of time. My first hard wall was probably the raid, because it arrived with a lot of issues, where specifically on console it was way harder on console than on PC, because you needed such precise aim to like cripple these, crazy tank bosses.
Yeah.
And you could really only spec into one like crazy DPS build to be remotely efficient. And it was the first activity that didn't have in-game matchmaking. And unlike Destiny, where I can just log into the app and just find a team in 2 seconds, the Division didn't have that kind of infrastructure in place. So it's people like hopping around on Discord or like DMing on Twitter to like set up a raid group, and it was more work than I wanted to do, and something I had never had to do at all at any point in the Division because everything is match made. So I dropped off after that. I did come back for the first. I think it was Act 1, whereas they had like 2 new story missions, one at the zoo,
Yeah.
and there's another one in like the woods or something, and then they had the Kenley College thing, which was like the little challenge thing, and that was fun. It was just something I kind of ran through a couple times and then just
That what you just said is a perfect summation of the Division.
It was fun.
That was fun.
Yeah.
It didn't keep me long term, and I think some of that is like core to how the Division plays and like how gearing works and stuff. That just doesn't quite connect with me, but just it wasn't enough to bring me back for the future content they added. But I am coming back for the expansion, so I mean we can get into that later. But.
Totally agree.
Well, Duggan, I think for me, my experience was really weird. I basically had our buddy Illegal Knot. He carried me through World Tier 5, and we did it in an insanely fast period of time, right? So then I'm like, all right, well, I'll be ready for the raid. We hopped into the raid. I think you were with us, right? It was me, you, and Illegal, and some of the other guys?
I don't think so.
No?
Maybe?
Maybe.
No, maybe.
So anyway,
I doubt it was that forgettable. I don't think so.
We went through and we cleared that first boss, and then we got to the next one, and we're just like, no.
Maybe that was, maybe I did that.
Yeah, so that's about as far as we got. And, well, I don't even know if we got to the second boss. We cleared, like, the first, like, there's the outside sequence, then you fight the guy with the pack that you have to shoot, and then there's another part, and then you fight the 2 robot dogs, I think is the progression of that. And
did you beat the raid?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, Ice-T beat the raid. He's a real gamer.
Ice-T
we didn't beat the raid. We're not.
What can I say? I can't beat Ice-T. And
I can't beat Ice-T either.
I think my biggest problem with it is it's just the repetition and the loop of just shooting something repeatedly with your LMG, waiting for the armor to break off at high-end content, and it didn't really grasp me as interesting. As I've been diving in to Warlords of New York and looking at some of the stuff that they're doing, they're building towards a system that really gets you invested in how you're crafting your characters' armor and weapons and everything all together to make this really, really fun experience. They're going to allow some of the stuff they're going to have a talent and attribute storage. They're going to have infinite leveling with the Shade Cache. There's a new season system, which actually sounds interesting. They went over that on the State of the Game this week. The Dark Zone is changing. It is going to be more like Division 1. There's going to be new exotics and gear. So that sounds really interesting, like an LMG that never needs to be reloaded. That gives your teammates passive buffs. Lady Death, that incentivizes you to run around because you build damage stacks. And they also talked about the new AR today. I don't remember exactly what was going on there. There's going to be global difficulties and directives, legendary difficulty. So like you're going to be able to set your world tiers and such. You're going to be able to acquire new abilities like the sticky bomb that a lot of people like. Skill tiers are replacing skill power. So they're just simplifying the whole gear system is the TLDR version. And then the seasonal stuff sounds pretty fun for the most part. A lot of people are a little upset. Some people are upset because there is going to be a level 30 bench for those that don't get Warlords, and then a level 40 bench for those who decide to get Warlords.
What does that mean?
So what it means is this whole storing your talents and abilities thing. The developers have repeatedly said that you're going to be able to do that if you get Warlords on your level 40 bench. You can do that on your level 30 bench, but they don't like cross-pollinate. Otherwise, you would just be able to...
So you can't level to 40 unless you have Warlords.
Correct.
Okay.
You're stuck at 30. You can still hit gear score. You can still hit gear score 515, but you can't hit level 40. You can't use the infinite shade cache thing. You can't utilize the season system. This is a hard reset point for them. And I think they have a big opportunity to expand the game to a lot of players like myself who say, oh, hey, I could literally buy the Warlords expansion, level up to 30, and hop into the game and have a reset point. And that's why I think there's a lot of strength here. Whether or not these systems end up working in the end, time will tell. And I think some of the core problems that we've discussed, like the bullet spongy feeling enemies, and that's still going to be there. But I do think a lot of players are going to come back and check this out. Will they stay? That's the question.
I want to talk about the loot because I think that's inherent to why the Division has never been exciting for me. It's always been cool. It's always been. I've had an enormity of pretty good times in the Division 1 and the Division 2. I've very rarely had a really good time in the Division 1 or 2. And the times that I have had a really good time, it's in the Dark Zone. I think the loot, and more specifically, and I know this is for people in the audience who have been playing the Division for a long time and following the game, you're going to be hearing this for the millionth time, but I still think it's relevant feedback because, I mean, it's why I feel the way I do about the game. There is a dissonance, obviously, between the thematics and the mechanics. It is a tactical, realistic-looking world with RPG shooting mechanics. They've improved it a lot, and they're continuing to get closer and closer and closer to that fast, frenetic, good-feeling shooting. But at the same time, that diminishes the RPG mechanics in a way. And it's definitely an RPG. There are, you have a gun that is dealing a numerical value, and obviously that's the way it works in every shooter. But in this shooter, it's especially relevant because the numbers are so low so much of the time, which leads to bullet sponginess. And they've done a lot. I remember talking to Julian Garrity about who's I believe the game director over there about making 2 feel better in terms of the shooting. And a lot of it had to do with enemies reacting, being staggered, them keeping red bars, which are the easy to kill grunts around even in the hardest level content. And I do think that Division 2 had a significantly less of a problem with bullet sponginess. I don't think the sponginess is as much the problem as I remember the late great John Bay and Total Biscuit said, it's really hard to get excited about a piece of loot that isn't a gun that shoots lightning. And while I don't necessarily know that's true because I play a lot of milsim shooters, I play a lot of, I like real world analog guns in video games, but they're usually a shooter before they're an RPG, and the Division is not. The Division is an RPG before it's a shooter. And I still think it's been really difficult for them to overcome that obstacle. What the developers seem to get excited about in terms of this loot sounds sick, it's going to be so much fun, people are going to love it. For us, Destiny and World of Warcraft players and Diablo players is like, yeah, I guess that's cool.
New knee pads.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that has been a problem the entire time. Now, with that said, Warlords of New York, I almost want to call it Warlords of Draenor every time I hear it for some reason. Warlords of New York does sound like if they're going to be some cool new exotics, I think they really need to lean into that, and really incentivize different play styles. I definitely fell into in spite of loving bolt action sniper rifles and shotguns, I totally just fell into using an LMG and AR when I hit the end game because it was like the most efficient thing, which kind of sucked. So.
Yeah, I mean, ARs are still pretty powerful in the game. Paul, do you have any thoughts on the topic?
Yeah. For me, it's kind of a mix of loot and gameplay where I actually like a lot of the guns in the Division. Like, even not really as a big third-person shooter fan, like I always enjoyed like getting a new LMG or SMG or sniper or something, and then have it like really, you could like feel the talents on a lot of the weapons, and gunplay always felt pretty good to me. But in terms of the armor loot, it all just kind of blended together. Like, it's all just backpacks and knee pads and gloves, and it didn't really add up to me. Like, I got one cool like hunter mask, and then I put that on and I looked awesome. And it's like, why would I ever need anything else? Because of what all the stuff they put in, like caches, like hats and sunglasses, like just the fashion game, shall we say, is not really there. So you're just picking stuff for stats, picking stuff with matching set bonuses, and that's kind of it. I was also playing in an era where there weren't that many sets, and then they came out with a bunch of new sets, and then they were all in the raid, and I'm like, well, shit, okay. Like, I know that's different now, and I know they've added more, so I'm curious to see how that works. My other issue is kind of with gameplay, and they've always kind of been in this weird situation where it's like assault, defense, like skill power. And skill power used to be like nothing, and you couldn't even do skill power because it was just so bad. But my problem is like those aren't really interesting categories. Like the only really kind of interesting combat is mixing up gunplay with skills. Because if you're like hard specking into assault just to burn people down fast enough, which used to be like the old meta, it gets really boring really fast. If you're just like, okay, I have this one gun, it can shred, that's it. And like defense is very boring. Like it feels necessary because of how not spongy you are as a character, but like
Yeah.
specking into it just feels like a waste, and then it makes those other things like really underpowered, and so you don't feel like you're doing any damage. And like I get that I'm not like Mr. Hyper optimization, and maybe there's ways to do this better than I have, but finally they already buffed skill power stuff once, and I know they're changing it again and moving to a tier system.
Mm-hmm.
But I went back after the first skill power buff when they just like crazily increased a ton of the values on the stuff. And that was the first time I'm like, okay, this is really fun. Like I'm really enjoying combat, but then it's like nothing else felt fun except making a skill power build. So it's this kind of balance that they haven't quite ever figured out, because I'm not even sure if the three categories are interesting enough by themselves when the skills are really like the kind of out there stuff that does all the crazy things, but you really have to go hard there to make it like dominating in the field.
And as cool as a skill builds can be, hopping back in as a casual player, I've been trying to navigate this pretty deep system of gear and equipment and figuring out how to min-max your character out, and it's overwhelming to say the least. There's a ton of information. You got to look at your health, you got to look at your armor, you got to look at your damage, you got to look at the three systems that you said. What was it? Armor, damage, and skill, right?
I don't know if they're called that, but that's what they do. Yeah.
And then you have your weapon DPS. And anyway, you got to like lay it all out. I'm thankful that with Warlords, they really looked at that, and it seems like they're going to be addressing that system. So the core gameplay loop, that's, James, you and I played it. Like, it feels the same.
Yeah.
It feels like the same game. I really feel like the gun. No, I'm just kidding. To quote the donkey meme. But, so that part feels the same, but I started to realize where the fun of the game is really going to be is with that end game system, finding perks, finding all your Pokemon, making sure that they're on your level 40 table so that you can craft your god builds. And the fact that they're creating a new system that will allow the game to outline drops when you get them that are god rolls, drops that you get them that have a perk that you should throw on your bench so that you can make god roll guns. That's going to be super intriguing to players, I think. And the gear problem that you addressed, they did come out with gear sets in Division 2 Year 1, we'll call it. They're looking at that now. Like they revealed there's the System Corruption set, which is a PvP focused set. And then there was the other set, which I'm trying to find in my notes.
Striker? Aren't they bringing Striker back?
Striker was the big one. Thank you.
That's from D1. That's the one I used a lot in D1.
Yeah, so that's a big...
do a lot of damage.
Yeah. Available anywhere sets are sold, targeted loot or random drops. Perks, Striker's Gamble. Weapon hits amplify total damage by 0.5%, stacking up to 50%. 1 stack lost per second. 3 stacks lost on each shot miss. Gear has talents on chest and backpack. Exotics have talents, but chest piece talent makes sense. These are my crazy person notes. Okay.
I'm like, what are you saying?
Yeah. Okay, so
it's like the time, yeah.
So if you put a chest piece talent on, you can max out your stacks for Striker's Gamble from 50 to 100, and if you apply a backpack talent, you can decrease stack losses for like missed shots on the thing. Yeah.
There's a pretty interesting discussion taking place in the chat right now, which it's going on for a minute, but where I kind of jumped in. Gumball Cannon says target loot farming is phenomenal. And jumping back into just do a challenging mission today, that was really cool to see. Like you can kind of target specifically. It's almost a little bit similar to the adventure system, I guess not really, because you can't necessarily target loot, but you can kind of, if you need this specific mat, you farm Act 1 in Diablo, so on and so forth. Someone else is saying the Nick Radice, I don't know if I'm butchering your name. They're a bunch of quality of life decisions Destiny could take from the Division, which would make Destiny so much better,
So,
especially
like,
recalibration.
yeah, Destiny's going through this whole controversial thing right now where they're gonna start having legendary floors, or what did they phrase it as, Paul? What's the
You
specific
can't
phrasing?
infusion ceiling. I don't know. It's like you can't
Yeah.
infuse them past a certain point.
Yeah, so like old weapons are gonna go away. I mean, for me, I don't feel that passionately about that. But looking at what Division 2 is doing, where you're able to take talents out and put them on a bench, that's largely what the Destiny community has been asking for. Just like, look, I don't want to keep all these weapons either, but I want to know that they're there and I feel safe and warm inside when I dismantle them. So if I can just pull out a garbage roll from gun 14 that I never use, then I'm going to feel good about it. And Division seems like they're sort of trying to address that with this talent system on the benches. And that's really interesting. By the way, the striker perks are like, if you have 2 pieces of the striker set, you get a 15% weapon handling buff. And then if you have 3 pieces, you get a 15% rate of fire increase on a 3-piece set. So they're figuring out ways to make the sets really, really interesting. And then
What's like
That doesn't sound that interesting, honestly.
Yeah, that doesn't sound that interesting. What's the
15% handling buff?
must-have striker bonus? There's got to be
it's the
50
stacking
it's the rate of fire.
stacking to 50. Yeah.
So you have a stack to 50, you have a 15% rate of fire increase, you're going to be doing a lot more DPS. Now, here's where I think this stuff falls apart. And it took me so long to get into Division because this is complicated to convey, and it's also difficult to navigate as a player unless you really get into it. But once you get into it, you get it. Like, I understand why Division players love this game. It's all about min-maxing your build, coming up with interesting things that pair well together, making sure you have like the 3-piece gear set so you get that 15% rate of fire. How do I convey that to my friend who's never played Division 2? It's very difficult to. You have to get in the ecosystem and understand it. And it's
I distinctly
hard to get
remember when I was reviewing the Division 2, I got warmer and warmer and warmer on it the more I played it. The more I played it, the more I enjoyed it, the easier it was to jump back in. And actually just jumping back in today, it was definitely that very cliche kind of RPG welcome back, you may as well start over thing, where it's like, what does all this mean? And in addition to that, I think my desire to kind of engage with a system like that is diminished in the absence of something that I really want to play, like an excellent Dark Zone. So can we talk about what they're doing with PvP in the Dark Zone to kind of refocus what's going on there?
Absolutely. Here is the segment that I wrote up for my VO. Let me just find it, Duggan. Dark Zone is going to be much closer to how it was in Division 1. An important distinction is that signature weapons are out in the Dark Zone. That's going to level things out. Described as being... the Division team said this. This is going to be for the wolves, not the sheep. This is a place for players who are ready to take on the challenge of another player, and they're no longer making it a space that appeals to everyone.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank God.
That's what they're saying about
damn
it.
time.
Yeah,
the Dark Zone.
The Dark Zone
so
should
I
be
saw
a
this thing that made me sick
place.
this morning. I opened up Reddit. I have the Division subscribed on there, and it was like this guy who took a photo with like 10 other people, the entire instance of the Dark Zone, and it almost made me vomit in my mouth. It was like, we all grinded gear for 25 minutes and nobody shot each other. And I'm like, ugh! Why have the Dark Zone if you're going to do that? It should absolutely be for the wolves. It should be a space where you feel tension. If you're just going in there to try and get something PvE and get out, you should feel like you're being hunted the entire time. And it should be a place where you kind of aspire to become the hunter. Otherwise, it's not doing anything interesting in a gameplay sense. And yeah, that kind of like emergent team play when you can kill each other is interesting in games like Ultima Online or Eve, or when the de facto thing is to just kill somebody on sight. But when the rest of the game is cooperative, the fact that you're cooperating in the Dark Zone and doing nothing else is like, whoa, that just reassures me that the Dark Zone needs a rework.
Well, do you remember, like, they used to have XP loss, and they had all these pretty punishing systems in the original one.
Sure. And I think you can find a happy medium. Like,
and I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
You can still make it a punishing environment, or at least make it feel tense without having really, really feel bad mechanics, if that makes sense.
I think the Dark Zone has been in a good place for a grand total of like 4 days in the entire
beta
lifespan of the Division 1. I have never liked the Dark Zone.
I like the Dark Zone.
They have been trying to make it work like for so long, and like there's just so many core things that like I at least personally find like just the antithesis of everything I want to play in a game like this. Like it's not balanced for PvP because you kept running into people that are like trying to disengage from PvP. So it's just one group stalking another group and then running away. It's a lot of griefing and trolling. And it's not made for PvE because if you want to go in there and farm, you risk losing your gear. And it's never been balanced correctly for more than like a week at a time. I don't know. Like I'm sure I'll see what they do this time, but I have seen so many Dark Zone reworks at this point. I would be amazed.
And also, there's no shortage
thing.
of really amazing PvPvE environments out there. And not even just strictly PvPvE, but interesting, dynamic, unconventional PvP spaces like Rust. Getting back into Hunt, which is fantastic. Escape from Tarkov is really popping off. So the bar is super high for something like that. And to Paul's point, I even remember in beta, to get to the cap, the stat cap, and get Caduceus, which was the best Dark Zone weapon at that point at D1 beta, was a very little time investment. So people got there pretty quickly, and therefore it was a relatively balanced space. I remember when D1 launched, you have that one interaction where you take a full auto shotgun with a 30-round mag, and the guy just stands there and takes it because he knows it's not going to kill him just for fun, and then shoots you once and you die. So yeah, it's always been a really cool on paper thing, and it's never come into its own. But to me, that's the bait on the hook. Without the Dark Zone, the rest of the Division and my desire to engage with all of its various systems kind of falls apart for me personally as a player. I know there's a lot of people out there who play this game cooperatively with friends or casually or even in a hardcore PvE sense. More power to you. I'm just not one of those folks.
Do you play like the actual PvP modes that aren't the Dark Zone?
I tried.
Whatever they're called.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they're called. But
I tried. It was
the one where you set up turrets and stuff. And
normally I would worry about you not knowing it, but nobody plays that. And I think
it's interesting because that was invented because they were like, okay,
right?
you should have just made a dedicated PvP space, and they did, and like it was fine. Like I don't know, it didn't really super catch on either.
It's like team deathmatch. It doesn't
really
matter.
Rewarding. They actually give you a lot of loot from there, and you didn't have to do anything. But
I remember playing it with Illegal Knot, and I remember getting some cool snipes on top of a hotly contested top of a building, but it was very basic. And in a game like the Division, especially when the Dark Zone is such kind of a thematic pillar of the game, I really want to see them take all of their PvP efforts and focus it on that space to make it what it should be. What should it be? I think it should be a tense space where you can go to show off your build, or at least use your build to allow you to survive or thrive. So it's super hard. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not an easy thing to come up with the space, and I don't even know what the right answer is. But I just know that without that interesting PvPvE space, then I'm like probably never going to get fully on board the Division 2.
Leaning into that, I don't know if the Dark Zone will work though, because I think it'll be like, let's say they just revert to the D1 system.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I remembered the survival mode from D1.
I think that was the best PvE thing they did overall. And I thought that was actually coming back. I heard rumors that it might for this expansion, but I guess not.
That was great. That was like, I can't remember when that came out.
Yeah, you go in,
battle royales.
You go in, you have nothing, and you got to gear up.
Yeah, it was a little before like the big battle royale surge.
Yeah, we did the interview. I had to do the interview at E3 when they had revealed it, and they were talking about sort of revitalizing Division 1, and then Division 2 came out like
it was fun. It was just too dark. It was too hard to see. That was my only complaint.
But I remember playing that a few times and winning a few times, and I think that was fun. It's really difficult without resetting the stakes to make a balanced space or a dynamic PvP space when you can come in there with your build that you've been grinding for hours and hours and hours and kind of stop. It's binary at that point. It's either you can stop with your build and we're not normalizing your stats, or we are normalizing your stats and now you feel bad for having spent all those hours grinding stuff that you're not utilizing. So it's tough. That's
like subtle
great paradox.
It's a tough balance to strike. Some of the things they're tweaking, like voice is going to be on by default. You can turn it off. So right away, there's communication is just open if you choose it to be. You can report people easier, like they stay within a larger range. There's a 300 millisecond activation time for going rogue. So if you go rogue, you're going to be able to to fight everything, and normalization is removed in the Dark Zone. So like
Normalization is removed. Okay, so
yeah,
it's like
that's
Iron
what Chat's
Banner.
saying. Yeah,
Right.
and then some of the things that they talked about in chat are like how they had the PvE set. They also have a PvP specific set called System Corruption that they revealed yesterday. That's going to drop in the Dark Zone. It's going to be, they say it's going to be tough to use, but you know, if you master it, you're going to be deadly. Basically, if you have 2 pieces, you get 15% armor on kill. You got 3 pieces, you get 40% disrupt resistance and 40% pulse resist. Hackstep protocol is the name of the thing. It replaces.
How does that work? Is it? Sorry, I don't know if you know
You
the answer
show
to
up on
this.
Pulse for a less amount of time?
Or is it a 40% chance to not show up on Pulse at all? And then similarly, is it like I'm either getting stunned or not getting stunned, or am I just having a reduced duration on crouch?
I think that's reduced duration for
Okay.
Disrupt.
I'm not sure because this is just an image with stats on it.
Sure.
Let me read you the perks really quick. Hackstep protocol replaces armor kits with an instant infinite use ability on a 20-second cooldown that grants 50% bonus armor and hides your nameplate for 5 seconds. That's kind of interesting.
That's the first interesting perk I've heard all night.
Yeah, so like you kind of like go incognito, I guess, like within the
Yeah.
Dark Zone, making it harder to
So-
identify you as an enemy. That can
That's
be
Well, I
deadly.
mean, like
hilarious.
you go rogue, you pop that, you shoot people, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Talent chest, compiler optimization, decreases Hackstep protocol cooldown from 20 to 15 seconds, and then your backpack talent, multi-threaded execution, increases Hackstep protocol bonus armor from 50% to 100%. So,
Okay,
so you pop your Hackstep protocol, right? It hides your nameplate for 5 seconds, and you get 100% bonus armor.
5 seconds? That's so short.
So you well, think about it. You go rogue, you fight with another opponent. They burn through your armor. You pop
that's not how I would
this.
use it.
You pop this.
You hide
get
your
100
name.
You get
They're
your
like, where'd
100%
they
armor
go?
back.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think I'd use it preemptively as opposed to reactively, right?
It could be duplicative also. So like it just doubles your armor. That could be absolutely insane. And
So-
Kaze Oniwaban, clever, wants me to talk about the overcharge mechanic. So with the new skill system, you can actually overcharge it using, I think you need an exotic to do that, but then you get like some insane buff of damage, like up to 400% damage increase on things was one of the things they teased, but that was on a skill.
Ooh, that's nice.
So I believe that was on the sticky grenade. Maybe Kaze can help me out with that one. But yeah.
Interesting.
I didn't know about this new system with the sets where you're talking about how there's like 3 perks and then there's 2 talents. So it's like you can get the full perk set with only 3 pieces, but then you can just kind of make it better with 2 more pieces. That's interesting. I didn't know that was a thing. So, that might not be new. But
yeah, currently they have that now, and I've been looking at it in the game and starting to realize, okay, well, I have a bad secondary perk, so I'm not going to do that first full set, but maybe I'll do 2 pieces to build into this. And honestly, that's where things get super interesting when you start really diving into that. So this new system where you're going to have name sets that are going to clearly identify if you're, if you have a god roll drop, if you have a perk that you want to throw on your table. I think if it's conveyed well, and that's one of the challenges I have with Division 2 also, I feel like a lot of stuff is buried. I think one of their biggest challenges is their UI elements.
That's really good feedback, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. The UI elements could just be flashier. I don't know how to put it in a better term. It's just hard to convey all the data that they're trying to convey. It's overwhelming right now. I think about how Destiny is.
I think when you have to, when you literally have to scroll to see one effect, the full thing of one effect.
the little paragraph they write about each talent, and you have to.
Yeah. People are comparing it to Berserker mode and WoW, or Bloodlust.
Overcharge.
The overcharge mechanic. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I don't play
Yeah.
it.
Well, I guess. Well, that's just a flat damage increase, and then you can't use it again for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you're a troll, you can pop it before you start the fight, so your raid can't use it during the fight. If you're really pissed at your raid.
Not a WoW show. If we did the WoW show, I would be the one that would have no idea what's going on.
I don't
So,
even
Oh, no,
know
it
what we
would
would talk about anymore. I guess we could talk
it
about
would just be
classic.
Duggan. I never
Yeah.
played WoW.
so I had one more topic, Doug, and we went and played it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
they were trying to hype us up on the seasonal system. They showed us a page that was like all redacted, and then said you get drops like of mats, and then you
Oh,
get
it's a
more
battle pass for
drops
sure, right?
for the battle pass. And
Yeah.
we were like, how is this interesting? Like, I don't understand
know.
what this is.
To Paul's point, like I'm good on sunglasses. I have one slot for a helmet,
Right.
and it is occupied with a sick mask. So either give me a sicker mask. I just don't really know. When your whole it's really difficult to like make a battle pass when your whole game is loot already. But I guess what they said, which like any battle pass, you can engage with it if you want to, and if you don't, you don't have to mess around with it. I assume there will be some kind of monetization option there, as with their cosmetic system, which all things considered, is really out of the way, in terms of the amount of content that we get for free. I do think like they are very generous. I definitely can't hold that against them.
Yeah.
They had a whole year of free content, essentially. They just didn't do DLC until now.
Mhm.
Which
This
is
weekend-
unusual.
This weekend's free.
Oh, yeah,
you
I
can
did
get
that.
you can get the whole game for $3 right now. So Division 2 base is $3.
I had my buddy do that, yeah.
It's insane.
Why
Like it's just get it. It's absolutely nuts. You can play for free this weekend, and then if you really hate it, don't get it and don't play Warlords. I don't know what to tell you,
$3. Like
you
the
know?
base story alone
But-
is like 30 hours. Just
Yeah. People are
Yeah.
like, I played for 5 hours and I didn't like it. I'm like, well, you paid $3, so you got your
Yeah.
money's worth it.
Less than $1 per hour. Pretty good.
And then Warlords, if you want to pile that on, that's going to be 30.
Oh, it's a
So
free
for-
play weekend? Is that
It
true?
is, yeah. So like starting today, actually, you can download Division, play it all weekend through Sunday, and if you do that, they give you like 2 free masks or whatever just for playing. So totally free. If you're curious about Division, you can do that. Not a sponsored plug, just good advice if you're considering
True.
purchasing a game.
Honestly,
Just
those
logic,
masks got me to install the game.
Dude,
100%.
I gotta
one
install
of
like
them-
60 patches on Xbox before this DLC comes out.
Yeah, and if you already own the game, if you play this weekend, you get those masks.
all right.
One of the masks is actually
Might have to.
part of my full set already. So I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. People should get that.
Yeah.
I
imagine there was an internal battle like, we can't give this away. They look too sick. They're like, do it.
Yeah.
It was the right call. Don't be stingy with that kind of stuff, for sure.
So the whole last state of the game, they talked about that. They talked about the season pass, and I'm just like, all right, this is going to be a really boring state of the game. But then it was like 45 minutes of solid info and new modes and these new gear sets and all this crazy stuff. So, basically, I don't think what's going to draw people in is the Warlords New York campaign. I think that'll be interesting for some, but
I
most
like that
people
you
are just
get
gonna tear
new-
through it.
Thing that I like about that I think makes it stand out from previous DLC drops or just content in general in the base game is that you are getting the new skills of the bosses you're fighting, which at the very least the first time through is interesting. Certainly not after that,
Very
but
Mega Man.
yeah, for sure.
nice thing there.
The Mega Man bell anytime we say it.
Yeah, so basically you finish the campaign, you hit level 40, that opens up your recal bench, that opens up your season pass, activities, projects, bounties, like basically everything cool that people are excited about starts happening at level 40 after you've gotten to experience the story. And the way they want your gear rolls to progress is basically normal gear drops are going to progress to prep you for hard difficulty, which will prep you for challenge, which will prep you for heroic, talking about the world tiers. And yeah, they talked about some of the systems where you're going to be able to fight enemies and then switch your polarity. So basically what will happen is enemies will either be blue or orange. You fight them in this special mode, and then you're able to level up within that mode and actually get a free exotic drop if you hit like level 9, I believe it was. Which
Wow,
to me
that's really
is,
interesting.
that's pretty insane.
I don't understand anything you just said.
So you ever play
So
those bullet hell shooters where you got to switch between your polarities?
No.
No?
Is this a
You ever
separate mode?
You ever play Thaddeus and Axaramus in World of Warcraft? That fight?
I
Have
know
you
what
ever-
switching polarities is, but like, is this a separate mode in the season pass,
Yeah,
or is
it's
this like a world event?
It's an event basically that
Okay.
will happen periodically, and you can opt into or not do it at all because there's tons of shit that you could do anyway. And if you do it, you go fight people, and there you'll clearly have a blue polarity on your character's arm. So you shoot the people that are blue, and if they're not the polarity you need, you can go punch them, or you can switch weapons or reload to switch your polarity. It's sort of like an arcadey fun thing that you can just do, and then you get a free exotic for doing it if you end up hitting level 9. And there's a few other systems that they mentioned during the stream that sort of do that. And that's one positive thing about the season aspect. It's going to introduce a new villain who you're supposed to chase down, like a bounty who you want to go kill. It's going to give you other modes that you can
John
check
Bernthal.
out. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So there'll be manhunt, and you can do that. You can do this strange polarity thing, and if that's for you, and you're going to get XP for that. And then they also talked a little bit about leagues, which are more difficult challenges, where it's like, go do all these things on challenging.
I don't think there's any shortage of content. I've never had a problem with
yeah.
a shortage of content in the division. It's been a shortage of me wanting to engage with that content.
Right. It's like how many seasonal models do we have now across all the games? It's like every game has a seasonal model. So it's like you can only keep up with a certain amount. So this one has got to be like top 3 in order to make the cut. Like, so for me, I'm always going to play the Destiny season. That's number 1. And then I might swap between like Borderlands stuff and Call of Duty or Apex or whatever season's going on there. So like this is going to have to be more interesting than those if I'm going to like keep going after the expansions. So and then
I don't.
And to be honest, you guys are definitely the marketers' target audience. They want us playing this game and talking about it. So
they gotta pay me as a sponsor or whatever. Like they paid.
So I guess what I'm asking is, like, I've told you a lot about the new systems. I'm sort of excited, but I'm also wondering how long is that going to last after Warlords?
From a player perspective, really nothing you said was super interesting to me. I think what's interesting to me,
no, it's fine.
As somebody who cares about and has interest.
You're a terrible marketer, Des.
I'm not marketing the game. I don't care.
No, I think as somebody who's like trying to see the why of what they're doing, it's interesting to me because the amount of modes you mentioned to me seemed like a shotgun to see what hits, and then maybe kind of, people really like polarity. We're gonna, iterate on that. I think the mode that has to hit for me, and we've said this before, but the mode that has to hit for me is the Dark Zone for me to re-engage in a significant way. I think if that mode hits and is really interesting, that's unique in the shared world shooter space. Just a PvPvE, high stakes, high reward space is really cool. How you do it, that's the $1 million question. But once they have that, I think the rest of the modes and the rest of the content contextually gets more interesting because I have this one thing that I know that I love. For in Destiny 2 is raids, and the PvP is great, obviously in Destiny 2, but the raids are phenomenal, and that's the reason to play that game, in my opinion. Because there's just a lot of great PvP shooters out there too. But anyway, that all sounds really cool. I like the direction they're going. And this is kind of like the tail of the tape for my relationship with the division. It's always like, oh, that's smart and neat.
But does it hook you? Does it hook your interest? Like, let's say you
it does in a deficit when there's no other games to play. But
yeah, you're gonna hop on.
There's
you're gonna
a lot
play
of
Warlords.
Now, so
is it going to retain your interest? And that's the question that I think
guess we'll
will
see.
Be really interesting.
Yeah.
What about you, Paul?
I mean, at baseline, it's interesting enough where I'm gonna buy it and play it. Like if I'll get a code, but even if I didn't, I would buy it and play it. That's a good start because none of the other past acts have gotten me to come back, really, like not for a long time. Like worst case scenario, I will play through the campaign and stop. Middle scenario, maybe I'll play through the campaign, hit 40, start pulling perks out, get a couple gear sets, and then stop. Best case, it really hooks me, really engages me. I stick through, I do the seasonal stuff, and I add it to my rotation. I am not expecting that one. I'm kind of expecting the medium one because I do kind of want to play around with some of the sets and the endgame stuff, at least for a little while. I also have the new Destiny season starting a week later, so that's not ideal timing, but I will play the hell out of it for that week for sure. But obviously they want people to play for longer than that. So the new stuff is gonna have to be like really engaging and like, oh, we fixed all these issues you had, and I don't know if it can do that. That's a pretty tall order, but it's always been a series I've liked. It's just never been a series I've been head over heels for and like must keep up with every new thing. And especially now when my two main looter shooters are Borderlands and Destiny, it's just it would take a lot. So we'll see. I'm going to give it a full shot, but I would be surprised if I was still playing it a month from release, like of Warlords.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys one more question before we go,
Mm.
and it's just more generally about these sort of games. What would you refer to games like Destiny and Division 2, Anthem? What genre do they fall in?
I mean, the ones you listed there are shared world shooter, but I think there's a larger category you're driving at, which I guess I would refer to in my. It's a little bit pretentious, but I would call it MMO adjacent,
Okay.
which is it's not a subscription-based MMO. There hasn't been one of those in a very long time. And it is not an MMO in the conventional sense where there are thousands of players a server and you can see hundreds of people on screen at once. But it does instill a feeling of anonymity amongst the community, that you are part of a larger community
Yeah.
that you don't know, and you want to kind of rise to the top of that community. And when people see your character in the tower, or uh, on a mission in Anthem, or in a social space, the White House in Division 2 or something like that, they want to aspire to be like you, and maybe team up with you and do cool stuff like that. So, yeah, I guess hopefully that answers it.
So the question I was actually going to ask was, do you think that,
But that was the
I was
question.
just generally the actual question I was going to ask is, do you think that these games as a service, or what the terminology you use, James,
Sure.
do you think that they're succeeding, or do you think that they're failing in their goal of having people basically just play their games to their life? Because I feel like we're really close to losing it. Like, it was super hype, for lack of a better term, when Destiny 1 launched, and now there's so many competitors that people have sort of realized what the formula is of these games, and they're kind of like, yeah, you got to be really good for me to do that.
Paul, you go first.
It's it's tough now because I feel like there just isn't room for that many of them. And I feel like you saw that back when the MMO scene was like WoW was the big one, and there were other ones that survived, but like there was really only one super major player in the genre at its peak. And then for this situation, I think that's probably Destiny, and that seems like the one that's going to survive probably indefinitely, at least,
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, 6 more years, I would imagine, based on Bungie's plans for it. And then after that, you kind of have varying degrees of different situations where like the division has been a success. Like the Division One was a hit and it got a sequel, but the sequel like underperformed. And I don't see the division maybe still being a thing in 3 or 4 more years. Like I think Ubisoft might just move on to something else. And then on the other end of the scale, you have essentially complete disasters like Anthem, where that just they really tried to like get in on that space, but too much went wrong. It's a very very hard genre to get right, and all of these games essentially have taken months and years to like hammer out the kinks and make it work. And too much went wrong with Anthem too quickly. So now we're in the situation where it's got to do this total from the ground up reboot. And then you have some stuff even in the middle, like Borderlands. Borderlands is one of the first games in the loot shooter genre, and it's a little less games of service as the others. So all it really has to do is kind of like balance stuff and then have DLC like it used to, like back in the day. And that will probably be sustainable because it's less like here's literally something new happening every single week. It's not that kind of level of service. So I think ultimately the problem with the genre is there just isn't that much room to get players to be that committed to one game, or more than one game. So people will kind of pick theirs, whether that's like Warframe or Destiny or whatever, and roll with it. And these other ones might cycle in and out, but to convert someone over, like I don't even know how you would convert me from Destiny to like making me a Division main. Like it's just I don't think that's physically possible at this point. Like I'm too entrenched in that game and that community. Like it's over. So like that it is my WoW. So I don't think we're gonna see too many more of these, like too many more new ones of these coming up. Like
Too expensive.
You have Godfall and things like that, but as a whole, I think it's very expensive. It's very hard to maintain over the long term and monetize effectively. So I'm glad it exists. It's my favorite genre. We're doing a whole show about it, so like it's it's popular, but it's challenging.
Absolutely. And you did hit the nail on the head. You and I will go check out Borderlands. We'll play it as things come up. But if you're asking us to no life it, that's going to be a really tough ask. I think longer term, we're going to see a lot more games like Outriders. We're going to see a lot more games like, God, what was it? I want to say it's like The Reckoning. I can't remember what it was.
Uh,
The game that's sort of
uh,
like Outriders.
yeah. It's
And we're going to
not
see
that.
fewer. We're going to see fewer Anthem and Destinies and Borderlands. Like Borderlands a little different, but
Remnant from the Ashes.
Remnant, yeah. But
Yeah.
we'll probably see fewer Destinies and Divisions going forward. Duggan, what are your thoughts on the question?
I don't think looting and shooting is going anywhere. I do think that like World of Warcraft, there's a similar progression happening with developers where they're realizing the amount of resources a game like this takes. And at some point, it may not be cost effective because, to Paul's point, you're asking these entrenched players to renounce their religion, uh,
Yeah.
apostatize, and convert to your new game. And it has to be. I actually think what's funny, at least from my perspective anyway, is I do feel like there's room for it even in the current space because like maybe as a World of Warcraft player, I'm just a jerk and then b a little spoiled in the sense that there's dedicated servers and all this other architecture that makes it this amazing online experience. The Destiny is still lacking, um, and I, I guess I agree with you, Destin, in the sense that I think we're going to see more. What is the core vision of this game? Is it we just want you to have this fun Diablo 2-esque progression where you're playing through the campaign, and when by the time you're at the end, hey, guess that's pretty much the game. Congratulations, you beat it, with some DLC here and there. I think that's a lot of fun, and if you have a vision for what that could look like and be separate from the rest of the space, that's cool. I think in terms of developers and publishers throwing their the full weight behind a title with all of the online amenities of dedicated servers and matchmaking, and social functionality and cross-platform play and PvP and PvE and raid content and to follow the WoW model and hit all of these targets, it's so insane to me. I think it's much easier to focus on one core vision and execute on it really well, even if it's something like Hunt Showdown, which that's not a looter shooter by any means, but you're thinking about your loadout. It's PvPvE, it's dynamic. You're thinking about, it's probably more battle royale esque, but I'm getting the same kind of experience playing a game like Hunt Showdown or playing a game even like Apex, where it's progression. And granted, it's a microcosm progression. Instead of me leveling up over 300 hours, I'm leveling up uh, to my kind of max power rank in 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm doing it over and over and over again. And therefore, there's a chance for you to get that really addicting dopamine rush of finding something that you really like, a la Survival in Division 1.
Mhm.
So I guess I would agree with the two of you that I don't think we're going to see too many more games like Destiny. I would like to. There could still be one on the horizon. But I think the whole concept of an action RPG uh, isn't going anywhere. And I think like arguably the biggest entry in the action RPG genre, looter shooters included, is on the horizon, which is Diablo 4.
Oh yeah.
And that is taking some pages right out of Destiny's book in terms of this shared world that phases people dynamically in and out as it needs them, and when you don't need them, you don't see them. There are these towns and social hubs where you see players that you wouldn't normally see when you're questing in a dungeon or something like that. So I think the motifs always end up disseminating down the line. And there's always a lesson taken from games like Destiny and The Division, but I don't foresee a future where The Division 3 is blowing my mind and it's all I want to play.
Yeah.
I mean,
That makes
what
sense.
I actually want to see, like what I would like to see more of, is more looter shooter games, but ones that are okay with having endings. Like I don't know enough
Yes.
about like Outriders and how that's all going to play out, but like a game like Outriders, that looks really interesting to me. And like I get there's loot, I get there's classes, like you level, it's the whole thing. But I would love for that game to end at like hour 150 after the grind to a certain point, and then it's like, okay, I got all the shit. Like I'm as powerful as I could possibly be. I'm done. I don't need a seasonal model. I don't need any. Like I'm like that was a good, healthy experience. And Destiny can still be my 1,000 hour a year game, but like I can't have 3,000 hour a year games. So I would be okay with having more smaller versions that still are looting, still are shooting, whatever, like, but have concrete endings and don't feel the need to go on forever like all these other games do. Like Anthem almost got to that point where I was like, I had awesome builds for all my Anthem characters, like by the end of the Cataclysm, and then it keeps going, and they're like, no, you still got to play Anthem. Like we're still going to rebuild the whole thing now, more Anthem, and just I got to be done.
At some point, you got to pick which one's your main.
Yeah.
Really, right? That's what it comes down to. Guys, thank you so much. I could keep going on various topics. Check out Duggan. Twitter at Thuggin Duggan. Do you want me to add that to lower thirds? Here, I'll do I'll do the 3 up again.
My name.
You're going to break your whole thing?
I did your name. So you take James and you put Thuggin in the front.
Yeah, THUGGN.
Yeah.
There's no A in Duggan. I don't know. I've gotten really good at saying that fast. Anyway, shoot me a
I
follow.
added my first lower thirds, but they don't have his Twitter handle, and he's upset.
I love talking about this stuff. So people watching just have questions or want to express an opinion to me, I'd love to hear it.
All right. Cool.
One more time.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining me. Hit up Duggan on Twitter. Make sure you follow him at Thuggin Duggan.
Nice biceps testing. Really good.
Yeah.
Some good progress.
Watch out. I haven't done anything for so long. Basically, all I was going to say was thank you guys for joining us. This show is on Patreon, patreon.com/lootdrops. If you want to support it, it helps me pay for those Libsyn fees every month. Appreciate those of you who do. To everybody else, we're going to sign off now. I will be streaming Division 2 after this, so I'll catch you in about 5 or 10 minutes when I'm back and able to do the swap on the set. Thank you so much for this episode. We'll see you next time to talk more about all this looter shooter goodness. Bye for now.